Well, my name is Andy Lanier. I'm the Marine Affairs Coordinator. I work in the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. And first thing I want to do today is to recognize that the work that I'm presenting in the development of our catalog and the OROWindMap tool has leveraged a lot of time and energy from a lot of different people. So I wanted to just take a moment and thank those individuals. First, to the development team who works on our technical enhancements at EcoTrust. They've been amazing partners to work with. The system that we use is actually very similar to the system that supports the Mid-Atlantic Regional Ocean Data Portal as well. So the work that we do is open source. And when we make development progress on our system and our tools, we actually help the systems across the nation. The portal development and coordination teams that have been a part of maintaining the West Coast Ocean Data Portal over time. If folks are on the line who are part of those teams, I just want to call you out and thank you for that effort. And then finally, to thank NOAA and BOEM who have made it possible to make this tool available. Next slide, please. So my organization, the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, is host to Oregon's federally approved coastal zone management program. That program has a role to steward Oregon's territorial sea plan in concert with Ocean Policy Advisory Council and with my agency's commission. As such, I am staff to the stakeholder advisory body in the state and am staff to a program that has been charged with maintaining data catalogs and archives that have been associated with the previous spatial planning efforts the state of Oregon has engaged in. Those included the marine conservation area planning exercises in the late 2000s, the exercise to amend Oregon's territorial sea plan for marine renewable energy within state waters. That's part 5 of the territorial sea plan. And as support for those efforts, my agency has maintained the Oregon Coastal Atlas, which is the project archive, the data archive of the information that's been gathered there that was used to make those decisions. We also maintain and host the Oregon Ocean Information website portal that provides additional kind of process support, outreach information, and direct access to some of the specific data catalogs that were part of those efforts. But in addition to kind of the coastal and marine data that our state has developed over time, the state of Oregon already has an existing GIS data infrastructure. It's overseen by the Oregon Geospatial Enterprise Office. And there is a number of framework teams where agencies from around the state develop information products that are crucial to supporting multiple business use cases for the state. So that includes transportation, it includes imagery, it includes utility information. All of those are types of information that are stored within the GIS kind of data catalogs that are maintained via the Oregon Spatial Data Library. And some of those data sets are served on a case-by-case basis through the Oregon Explorer tool. One example of a project that I have been working on recently is the Oregon Renewable Energy Siting Assessment Project, the ORESA project. That project has been looking at renewable energy across the state of Oregon, all types, and has included offshore marine hydrokinetic as well as offshore wind. So the work that is happening as a part of those projects will feed back into the data catalog that we have as well. So all that is to say that the state of Oregon has a pretty mature GIS infrastructure. We have a lot of archives that we can bring to bear as we look at this new issue. But then we also want to recognize the hard work and the data that is provided by our partners at the federal level. And whether that's at a programmatic level, like a fisheries office within NOAA, or up higher at a project level like the multi-purpose marine cadastre, those are systems that we have worked with over time. We have developed connections to as a part of the West Coast Ocean Data Portal and the West Coast Ocean Alliance. That has served well to help to maintain those connections to the catalogs. And I'm speaking not only of the technical connections to the places that provide the data, but also the human network that's important, so that when we have questions, we know who to contact from those different offices to make sure that we are receiving the best authoritative data that we can. So the West Coast Ocean Data Portal has had an infrastructure in place. And when the state and BOEM engaged in or decided to engage in a planning process, we decided to leverage the work that had already been done to create a curated offshore wind catalog and a curated offshore wind visualization tool. And that's what I'm going to be presenting to you today. I do want to highlight a couple of things about the work that we do. And the first of which is that as an organization generally, the portal does not store data. So we don't try and wrap our arms around download and then redistribute everything, because that provides a huge maintenance workload requirement. Instead, we have decided to connect to those other entities through published metadata catalogs and GIS web service providers. So we don't store the data. We call upon the ecosystem of our digital service layers that is provided by those entities across the West Coast and in some cases nationally. That being said, for Oregon and BOEM's planning process in particular, we as an agency, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, have the ability to publish data through services that can then be consumed and helpful and informative for our users as we proceed with our planning exercise. Next slide, please. So we now have a data catalog and a mapping tool. And this slide really just demonstrates the established pathways to find it. So you can go straight to the Regional Ocean Data Portal website to get there. There's a link directly from there. There's a link directly from the BOEM Oregon Activities webpage, as well as from the Oregon Ocean Information Planning website. And at this time, I would like to share my screen and do a live demo of the portal. And you will need to enable my screen sharing. Okay, just to confirm, are you now seeing the data portal?
Yes, it looks good, Andy.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing that I want to point out is that the data portal, through kind of maintenance and technical enhancements updates, as a portal itself was updated last year to kind of some of the latest, greatest open source technology. So that includes the fact that we are using the ESRI GeoPortal 2 open source software, and our content management system is managed by the Wagtail program. The offshore wind tool map tool uses a separate system entirely called Open Layers, and that has a Django database backend that allows us to organize the collection of web services into the structure that you'll see today. The goal of the data portal has been to facilitate the discovery of data in as quick a way as we can get you to it. And I'll just point out a couple of things right here on the home page. The first of which is if you want to go directly to the mapping tool to see the data, there's a tile that says offshore wind planning on the front page that will get you there. But I'm going to explore some of these other tabs first to show you and demonstrate the use of the Esri GeoPortal technology to look within the records that have been harvested from our network of partners across the West Coast. So on the right, you will get a number of records that are returned from the catalog. You can see in sum total, we have a little bit over 800 records to pick through. And the first search technique is just to use keywords. And you can get to a very quick kind of listing of data from keyword search. And you can use keyword search. You can use any of these search facets, which are these search items on the left side of the page to narrow your search. You can also use the addition of and or not as language to define, to further refine your search. So I could say kelp, not crab, because there was a crab layer that just appeared that I saw. So you can use keywords in a very flexible manner to subset your search right from the beginning. Let me clear that. You can also use the map to very quickly identify data layers that are present either in an area, so a data set can be to intersect the area within which we're looking, or it can be within the area within which we're looking. And these are based upon the extent rectangles provided in metadata records, and you can see those appear as you look at the map. You can also search by time period. So in this instance, I want to narrow my search down to the last 20 years or so. So you can move the slider, click on the time period, and then again subset the information based upon the date fields within the metadata that are part of the records in the catalog. The next and probably the most value add that we provide as a data portal is that the records that we've included in the system, we have added a curation step. So records that come from different places don't necessarily have a tag that's associated with a specific organizational scheme that we on the West Coast have developed and been using almost for the last decade now. And this has come out of the West Coast Coastal Atlas community, this idea of an established data dictionary and hierarchy. And as we add records to the system, we add tags so that you can specifically subset the searches that are related. A single record can have more than one tag so that it can be present in more than one category within the system. And then finally, I'd like to show probably one of the most important, which is that this is the network of data providers that we have connected to date. It includes many of those partners I've already mentioned, and you can very quickly select a partner to look within their catalog, and then you can look at the curated kind of organization within that catalog to find a record. I should mention also then what you do with a record, or what's possible to do with a record. The first of which is that, and hopefully they have good metadata, but within the abstract of a data file, you will see a description of what that data is itself. You will see a date that's published. You will see the source, and you will get a link to, or a list of the links. And if you click on this list, it will take you to the service or the server that is providing that data as a service. And if you want to explore that data, you can actually look and see what other layers are available from that particular service. And you can ask it to open up in a separate map viewer. I like to use the ArcGIS Online map since that's kind of the most standard format. So you can really get at and explore the data from our partners that's provided by the links to the metadata. And you can use this to create a map on your own if you'd like, if you have an ArcGIS Online account or you want to reference it through other services. So that's really the power of the tool, is it gets you to a record that you're interested in, provides you with an understanding of where it comes from. It gives you a sense of who to contact, how it was originated, all of which are then helping you to understand the information that's been made available by the system. We also have some pages that specifically have links to things like interactive story maps. We only have a subset of those, and those were developed in years previous by the West Coast Ocean Data Portal community. But what I wanted to direct your attention to was kind of the recent data themes option. And if you click on one of these tiles, it will take you to the OROWindMap viewer with a set of the resources within that viewer that have been specifically curated related to that topic. But I'm not going to go there yet. I want to take you to the offshore wind mapping tool, OROWindMap, directly from the homepage so that you can see what it looks like and so that we can provide an orientation to that. So here you can see the tool is laid out like many mapping tools with a mapping visualization kind of area on the right with a catalog of the information and kind of how you control the information that's in the map viewer on the left. You have standard features like the ability to choose a base map that you would like to use. Like I like to use satellite imagery if I'm looking at data that it might be hard to see because it provides a dark background. There are tools in the upper left here that I will mention in a bit, but one of the things that we heard when we first started rolling out this tool and showing it to some of our local partners before this webinar was that we got a request for linear measurement tool, and we've now made that possible. So we are taking a request for technical enhancements and keeping a list so that when additional funding becomes available, we can address those. But you can see the catalog on the left here is organized consistent with kind of the big hierarchical data organization themes from the catalog. They're not quite the same because we didn't have the option of nesting as many kind of thematic groupings in this interface. So, you know, some of these areas, some of the themes have been brought up to have more prominence. And, you know, the first thing you might want to do is understand a context of a setting. So what I want to do is I want to demonstrate that you can very quickly get to a layer of information that you're searching for from the keyword search right at the top if you don't know where in the catalog it might be located. In this instance, I just turned on the planning area that was shown on the slides earlier. Again, the depth contour is at that 1,300 meter depth mark, and I did see a question in there earlier. I believe that depth range was provided to BOEM by the industry as the technical limit of their ability to do anchoring. And so what I'm going to do with you today is slowly build up some context to understand Oregon's outer continental shelf and to demonstrate the functionality of the system. Okay, so I've now turned on 3 layers of information. You can see that in the active panel up here on the upper left of the kind of data organizational system. And I can see on the map here that the contours themselves have kind of overshadowed the planning area. And so the first thing I want to point out is you can rearrange the order of these items to make, so the layers that are on the bottom are on the lowest visual priority range. And then you can do things like adjust the opacity of a layer so that you can still see it, but maybe it's not as distracting if you're trying to focus in on something else. Again, we have that 1,300 meter kind of depth mark. And you can see that in this instance, it's being overshadowed by that extent of the planning area, which was at that same level. So by moving these around, by adjusting opacity and by adjusting the order, you can really customize and begin to understand with the service layers that are provided, different contextual pieces of information. So as I mentioned, I want to build this kind of from the ground up. You know, it's important to understand depth of the continental shelf, but it's also important to understand kind of the superficial geological habitats that are there. So you can turn on a layer of the habitats, and this is provided by the Active Tectonics and Seafloor Mapping Lab at Oregon State University. It's a product that has been worked on over a number of years and combines data from many different bathymetric survey and other types of survey to create an understanding of where rocky habitats exist on the continental shelf. If you're interested in understanding some of the confidence of that layer, you can look at kind of where some of the bathymetric surveys have existed, so you can see kind of data quality. And I do want to communicate the fact that uncertainty is inherent when we are looking at any map layers out on the outer continental shelf. They each have different time horizons, different strengths and weaknesses associated with how the data was created, how uncertainty was handled within that information. So those are important things to think about and to consider as you are exploring the West Coast region here, and in particular Oregon's outer continental shelf. What I'd like to do now is demonstrate some of the other features. And we have a number of different wind products Frank mentioned, and so we do have an annual average, and this is often what you see when you are looking at kind of a summary throughout the year of the averaged wind speeds, which is informative, but maybe we actually want to look at wind monthly averages. And when we do that, one of the things we can do is say, well, now we have a different use of the technology system to present a picture about how the wind speed changes throughout the year. So here is what we call a data slider. And this is for data that exists in the same geographic space but has different timestamps. You can actually get a picture of how that information changes over time. And if you want to understand the legend and the symbology here, you can open that up and you can see that there's a cutoff point at which you know, values of a speed below 7 have been symbolized as being gray, whereas other values are in color. So I'm gonna pause this. You can move this just by clicking the slider on the time horizon that you're interested in. And again, it's very informative to see maybe how wind speed does change throughout the year. And again, these are averages from that NREL data set that Frank mentioned earlier. We also have a number of different types of human uses that are present in the data catalog. And one of the ones I think about is specific infrastructure. So in the case that we already have something that has been built, we do have subsea cables that cross the outer continental shelf, both for telecommunication and for research. And here you can see those layers symbolized, similarly to what you might find on a nautical chart. As Frank demonstrated, we also have the electrical power station, substations, and transmission lines, so that you can begin to see kind of how the landward system could support or not potential development out offshore. So hopefully that gives you a good understanding of the kinds of things that you can do with the information that we are providing in the system, the flexibility that you have in the ability to order, rearrange those data sets that are there. And again, remember that these are all being provided by web services coming from the authoritative sources themselves. So if we get notice from one of those sources that their services are changing or they've added new layers, we have to make sure that we have the right connection details, but then it's almost immediately implemented in our system because the provider is the one who's keeping control of the data. Now, a couple of the other features that I wanted to highlight specifically are, if you like a map that's been created, we have the opportunity to share it. So in this bookmark here, if you wanted to share this with somebody for discussion purposes, you can copy this URL, you can load it into another view, and the system will remember the state at which and the organization within which you have created that map. So again, a very powerful tool for being able to share information from what you have explored with others. And I do want to point out that this is exactly what we have done with with the data themes. So as an example, I have loaded all of the fisheries related data into a map. You could get there by going to the portal, by going to data themes, and clicking on the fisheries. Now it does take a while to load the data from the service providers, so I have pre-cached this for now. So you may have to wait a while after you've gone to the system for those service layers to come up. But again, here you can see that we have connected to data from the Pacific Fisheries Management Council. Here's an interesting layer that provides landmarks and areas that they use as a part of their management decisions. Again, it may take a little bit of time once you turn a layer on for that service to respond. Frank demonstrated a number of fisheries pieces of information like trawling as an example. So you could turn on a layer, and here you see that we do have multiple time slices for the specific fisheries. Again, this information is coming directly from the NOAA Fisheries Research and Monitoring Group. And now you can see actually that service that I turned on originally showing kind of the area uses, some of the latitudinal lines that describe oftentimes where they use landmarks as in-season change. And then you can see up at the top here the number of data layers that you have active. And so again, Frank had demonstrated that there are basically two different kind of sources for fisheries data that we have currently, with some additional information being developed. So here I've turned on passenger fishing vessels. So this is going to be much kind of smaller vessels, not commercial fishing, but they show the importance of the area immediately around the port of Astoria from that community's perspective. Okay, I am going to conclude the demo. I think I've gone through all of the kind of features I wanted to share. So Bianca, if you can start sharing the PowerPoint again. So as I mentioned previously, we are continuing to develop our system over time. This introductory webinar is just that. We are kind of at the early stages still of work on our system. And in particular, the big area of improvement that I expect to see in the near future is a section of data library pages that are going to be more beneficial for browsing the information specifically within OROWindMap to have the lists of the data that are specifically provided in those kind of hierarchical categories that you saw on the OROWind mapping tool. Additionally, we have kind of in coming along the pike updates for the different data sets that you see here. So we are awaiting information from NOAA, USGS, and BOEM project to develop those marine bird predictive models, in addition to the marine mammals predictive models. And then there is a couple of other layers of importance, one of which is that in 2015, the data portal produced a West Coast fisheries closures layer. That was a summary of all the different types of closure areas across the West Coast. That product is being updated to our recent time horizon. And then we are in the development of a planning analysis layer. So using the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management aliquot grids, you'll be able to filter a layer based upon certain criteria like depth or slope or distance from shore, so that you will have different areas on the continental shelf that kind of get highlighted depending upon the criteria that you select in a filter. And then finally, we do have additional software upgrades that we are keeping in mind. The first of which is, in addition to the linear measurement tool, we've had requests for the ability to do area calculations. So that one is for sure in our next technical enhancements set of items. And then we have heard that there's a demand for individuals to be able to have a user account, log onto the system, and be able to store maps that they've created and potentially share those maps, excuse me, with a set of user groups that could be self-selected. And so communities that are interested in working together using the maps and the tools that we've provided can do so. Next slide, please. So, one of the goals of sharing our tool and our data catalog with you today is to let you know that if you're aware of additional data and information, geospatial data and information, we would love to hear about it. If they can cover any of the categories that you are interested in, we're really most specifically focused on Oregon for this effort, but if it's at the scale of the West Coast, we are happy to accept that as well. While we are focused on geospatial information specifically, is not required. There are, there's the ability to store other resources, publications, PDFs in a catalog format that's searchable using the same kind of techniques that I've demonstrated. But we do want to make sure that at the very minimum, we have good metadata associated with those products. So understanding how it was made, who is providing it, where it's being provided from, those types of things are important. And this data sharing guide that you see on the right is available from the BOEM Oregon website, and it has our contact information. So if you'd like to share with us, we welcome that. Next slide, please. And then finally, later in the year, the state and BOEM will be seeking kind of feedback and comment from interested parties on the data that has been gathered. We want to be able to provide a sense of the quality of that, kind of the focus of the different data efforts and whether or not there are gaps. And that will really help us to understand how to prioritize future information gathering, or how to search for additional information that may be out there existing currently that we don't currently have. Virtual meetings of this group are likely, and contact myself or Frank if you are interested in participating in that. We only have a very short list of participants at this time, but I presume that that will grow as our outreach efforts proceed throughout the year. Next slide, please. I believe that concludes my portion of the presentation.